genocide in South Africa. Things like mass expropriation without compensation. It's not a single farm that's been expropriated without compensation in South Africa. Yes, we have some issues with crime and criminality, but these affect all of our citizens in the same way. And so what we need to do is to make sure that when important trading partners like the US are making decisions around their outlook, their trade, their positioning, that they're making it based on the facts and not the fiction. And I think that's going to be very, very important. And then, of course, I want more market access for South African agricultural goods. Currently, we can only get citrus into the US from the Western Cape and I think it's Limpopo. That means that 85% of the rest of our citrus production doesn't have exposure. I'd like to change.
If the Act was to be, in my view, struck down in its entirety, and we go back to 1975, I don't know what's going to come after that. And in politics, sometimes you must be careful what you wish for, because often you can get it. And so, you know, what comes after that is open to a new parliament that has very different dynamics and that has parties that have very different internal dynamics. So my view as the minister is, yes, I recognize that there is a contradiction in Section 8 and 19, but I think that it is resolvable, and my job as the minister, A, is to try and provide resolutions to the concerns that parties have, and then B, to make sure that we have a regulatory framework that works parallel to the Act to ensure that any other issues around any other further definitions or processes is clearly spelled out, which we plan to do in a very consultative manner that includes agricultural experts, land reform experts, all types of experts, so that everyone is then very clear and happy on those regulations. But my bottom line as the minister is...
The descendants of the people who created the most diabolical system of white supremacy in human history, apartheid, they're not directly responsible for it, but it was a system that actually moved black people off of the arable land. So they inherited the land that the black people had to give up. It was called forced removal. It was something called a Bantustan policy, where they moved black people out of the cities and farmlands into these remote areas with non-arable land. I mean, it was just one of the most worst processes ever. But what has happened in this strange, bizarre world we're living in is that the Afrikaners have become the darling of these right-wing white supremacist movements around the world, that it's like the lost cause for them. It's like the old Confederacy. They're held up as these white Christians who are being dispossessed of their land. It's like this is a modern replacement theory in a country where, by the way, white people make up 7% of the population and own 78% of the farmland. So it's actually, there's no injustice here. As you mentioned, it's taking places away from refugees who are really being crushed by authoritarian governments and military governments, for these folks who have never had anything happen to them. I mean, Trump amazingly called it a genocide, one of the worst lies I've ever heard him say. There's just been a small handful of farmers that have been killed over the past 10 years. No land has actually been expropriated. So it's just a farce and a sham and a moral ugliness.
What happens
this year in South Africa? PEPFAR is contributing 7.9 billion rand of that. So when that money gets withdrawn, it will be 7.9 billion rand. PEPFAR was helping us in 27 districts out of the 52 districts of the country, 27 districts in 9 provinces. Because Northern Cape is not part of this. It's not part of the PEPFAR funding. So the number of people in these 27 districts who are working on HIV/AIDS are 271,606. Out of that number, 15,000 are funded by PEPFAR. And it so happened that these are the people of interest. But 8,000 of those, their jobs have come to an immediate end with the announcement, because they were paid by PEPFAR through US aid. Yeah. The others who are paid by PEPFAR through CDC, Center for Disease Control in America, they still have a reprieve until at least September. So this is where we are.